The times they are changing, but they haven't changed enough. I was thinking about something. I saw a video and it was talking about research that had been done looking at how children play in unstructured play. And so these researchers had gone and they had looked at recess, in elementary school, and they had watched the boys. And when boys were given unstructured playtime, they always created competitive games, football, basketball, races. There was always a winner, a loser, maybe a tie, but there was ranking and it gave them, a sense of accomplishment. And they were really excited about, testing their abilities up against another boy's abilities. And they got a lot of pride from the male validation of winning, of, besting somebody. When the girls were given unstructured playtime, a lot of times they would, draw, they would do hopscotch, they would, play games that were very cooperative. There was no winner. You don't win at hopscotch. You don't win at, you know, pulling out little dolls, talking about the bracelets that you're making or trying to create bracelets. A lot of what the girls were doing, there were no winners. It was just about the experience. It was about the, process of doing whatever they were doing, doing each other's hair, all of this was just about the process and about the experience of being together. And I thought that that was really fascinating. And now that we've moved into a different kind of dynamic between men and women, at one point, men didn't feel any need to compete with women because, hey, women had been put into a oppressive and suppressive and repressed position. They couldn't have access to many of the things that men had access to. So there was no concept of competing with women. But now that women don't have those limitations, it seems that some men feel the need to compete with women. And even some men need to call women masculine when everything that women are doing, having a job is not masculine. Running a household is not masculine. Being able to be self-sufficient is not masculine. Those are just skills of adulthood. And so a lot of what some men call masculine is just self-sufficiency, independence, and competence. Competence. And so when I was growing up, there were these statements that you would hear a lot, boys will be boys, and, don't blame Mr. Charlie. Mr. Charlie is just a man, and, you need to cover up because they can't control themselves. You need to watch where you go and watch your drink because, they can't control their urges and they'll do this, that, and the other if you're not watchful. So there was a lot of pressure on women to make excuses for men and to protect themselves because men were these beings who were impulsive and reckless. And, so women had to be the calming force. Women had to be the civilizing force. Women had to be the protective force for themselves and even for that man. And now that society is kind of backlashed against that and said, hey, that's not appropriate and you need to take control of yourself and you're responsible. Women aren't responsible. You are the man are responsible. Been a new shift that I've seen recently, and maybe the last 2 or 3 years, where I've seen a lot of posts that men are making about how the mother is the first teacher of the child. And if a man doesn't have the skills he needs to have as a man, then it's his mother's fault because, we have all these single mothers that are raising these men. Now, before, there wasn't any blame on mothers. When I was growing up, there was no blame on mothers. There was no, finger pointing at mothers that mothers were to blame. It was all about the man being incapable. But still, this is another way of saying the man is incapable. Because if it's his mother's fault and he's a grown man, then that's saying that he's not really fully an adult. He's still a child, completely controlled by what his mother did or didn't teach him. And in both of these scenarios, I've had men argue with me, and say, when you say that the mother's not responsible for the grown man's behavior, you're not taking accountability. And I say, sir, accountability is being responsible for yourself, not for another grown adult. And if he's grown, he should be responsible and accountable for his behavior, his attitudes, his mindset, his success or his failure. That's what being an adult is. So you are the one debasing men, not me. I'm the one saying men are adults. You are the one saying men are children, and men can't grow past the influence of their childhood. Come on now. Either he's an adult or he's a child. And if he's a child, then why are you saying that men should be submitted to? Why are you saying men are leaders? Because you can't say both. If he's not an adult, then he doesn't need to be talking about being submitted to or being a leader. Because being a leader requires accountability. It requires responsibility. It requires self-sufficiency. It requires leadership. And leadership is not pointing fingers at your mama. That's actually the opposite of any kind of leadership. So, I think this need that we're seeing on the playground for hierarchy and a sense of who I am in relationship to other people is kind of hindering men as they go into adulthood. Because if you're comparing yourself to the woman in your life and contrasting yourself to her and feeling inadequate, that's an internal issue. Stop basing your self-worth on some kind of arbitrary ranking. Your self-worth should be based on who you are, not what you accomplish in terms of a game or money or a position or possessions. Those are all things that can be changed, taken away, can vary from day to day. Your character, what you've built, the decisions you've made, your mindset, your attitudes, your values, those should be things that you've chosen and that you stand by. And they're not variable from day to day. And that's where your ranking should be. That's where you should say, I am this kind of person and I feel proud of being this kind of person, rather than I feel proud because I'm better than somebody, or I feel proud because, I won this particular thing. Not to say that you can't feel proud for accomplishments, but basing your identity on them is a very different thing from just being proud in the moment. So, some food for thought. May you walk in Zenergy.